Ever spent 15 grand on a bike that rattled itself apart before summer even ended? Yeah, some mistakes hit harder than a pothole at 60. About the kind of motorcycles that look amazing on the showroom floor, but once you roll out, they turn into vibrating, leaking, soul-crushing money pits. These are the bad bikes. They're dream killers. Today, we're tearing the mask off. 18 motorcycles that simply aren't worth your hard-earned cash. From overhyped cruisers to fragile sport tours, these are the machines that could make you regret ever swinging a leg over. Let's get into it. Number 18, Norton Commando 961, modern reboot. It looks like a dream. Classic British styling, polished metal, that iconic tank. The Norton Commando 961 is supposed to be a love letter to the golden age of motorcycling. But once you actually ride it, the romance ends fast. Let's start with the elephant in the room, reliability. The 961 reboot, especially models built before Norton was rescued by TVS, were plagued with quality control nightmares. We're talking oil leaks, electrical gremlins, warped brake discs, and even engine failures on low-mileage bikes. And if something breaks, good luck finding parts. Norton's past financial troubles mean there's a shortage of support, even for basic repairs. And then there's the ride. You'd expect a modern classic to blend old-school charm with present-day performance. Instead, you get a bike that's underpowered, rough, and wildly overpriced. The 961 makes just under 80 horsepower, which wouldn't be terrible if the bike wasn't heavier than it looks and handled like a freight train in traffic. And yes, the price. You're dropping nearly 20 grand for a motorcycle that feels unfinished, even untested. At the end of the day, the Norton Commando 961 is a bike you buy with your heart and regret with your wallet. Stunning to look at, sure, but once the novelty wears off, you'll wish you'd bought something that rides as good as it looks. And talking about deceivers, there's a bike with a fast engine, but really low quality. Number 17, Suzuki GSX-S1000F. On paper, the Suzuki GSX-S1000F sounds like a winner. You're getting a detuned version of the legendary GSX Roan 1000 engine, wrapped in a sport touring package with upright bars and a fairing. Sounds like the perfect everyday rocket, right? But once you spend real time with this bike, the flaws start to scream. First, the engine. Sure, it's fast, but it's also jerky, snatchy, and unrefined at low speeds. The throttle response is so abrupt, especially in the lower gears, that commuting through traffic feels like riding a bucking bronco. You'll spend more time trying to ride smoothly than actually enjoying the power. Then there's the ergonomics. Suzuki tried to make this a sport tour, but they didn't commit. The riding position is caught between track and tour and somehow manages to be uncomfortable for both. The seat is hard, the wind protection is minimal, and the suspension is so stiff it sends shockwaves through your spine on every bump. Build quality? MEH. The plastics feel cheap, the dash looks like it came off a scooter, and don't expect much in the way of tech. No cruise control, basic traction control, and a screen that belongs in 2010. Worst part? Resale value. The GSX-S1000F loses value fast, and there's a reason. Riders try it, tolerate it, then dump it for something that actually fits the sport touring role. Bottom line, the GSX-S1000F is a bike without a purpose. It's not refined enough to tour, not focused enough to thrill, and not comfortable enough to live with. There is something worse, however. Something that will make you spend your money chasing a unicorn that just doesn't exist. Number 16, Moto Guzzi Brava 1200. The Moto Guzzi Brava 1200 was supposed to be Italy's answer to the sport touring giants. A shaft-driven V-twin bruiser with classic lines, a comfy upright position, and European flair. But in reality, this bike was a misfire, wrapped in chrome. Let's talk about weight, because this thing is a tank. It tips the scales at over 560 pounds, and it feels every ounce of it in corners. Low-speed handling is awkward. Parking lots become choreographed struggles, and any attempt at spirited riding turns into a fight with physics. You expect elegance from Italy, but what you get is bulky, stiff, and lazy. Now the engine. That V-twin has character, sure, but also vibrations, heat, and noise that wear on you fast. It puts out a decent amount of power, but the delivery is clunky, and the fueling feels like a guessing game. You'll be constantly adjusting your wrist just to keep it smooth. And good luck with long rides, because the heat from the engine will bake your legs in summer. Maintenance? Don't even ask. Moto Guzzi dealers are rare. Parts can take forever to arrive. arrive, and many shops don't want to touch it. You're signing up for a long-distance tour that often sits still in your garage. The Brava 1200 had potential, but in the real world, it's all show and very little go. And if you think that's bad, wait until you hear what their Italian counterpart Ducati managed to mess up. Number 15, Ducati 996 base model. It's got the looks of a supermodel and the pedigree of a world champion. The Ducati 996 base model turns heads everywhere. It's beautiful, iconic, a real pure Italian art. But if you're planning to actually ride it, buckle up, because this bike is a full-body beatdown in red paint. Let's start with comfort, or more accurately, the lack of it. The riding position is extreme. Your wrists are slammed, your back is curved, and your knees are folded like origami. Every mile feels like a marathon. This isn't uncomfortable in traffic. This is painful on a perfect day. If you're under 40, it'll age you. If you're over 40, it'll break you. The engine? Sure, it sounds like heaven, but it rides like a diva. The base model skips the high-end parts of the 996 and 996er. You get mediocre suspension, a jumpy throttle, and rough low-end power delivery. It doesn't want to cruise, it wants to scream, but most of your time is spent in traffic, red lights, and parking lots. Then there's the infamous maintenance. This bike eats valve adjustments, requires special tools, and is so needy, it makes other Ducatis look low maintenance. Every ride ends with a wallet check. The Ducati 996 base model is a masterpiece to look at, but a misery to own, unless you live at a racetrack. And if you thought this was frustrating, there is an Italian machine that tried to be a sport bike and ended up being a complete headache. Also, if you've come this far, have you liked the video? What are you waiting for? And while you're at it, subscribe and join the ride. Number 14, Benelli TNT 600. The Benelli TNT 600 looks like it means business. Muscular frame, aggressive stance, and 4 cylinders of promise. At first glance, it seems like a bargain street fighter that punches above its weight, but give it some miles, and the cracks start to show. Fast. Let's get this out of the way. It's heavy. We're talking over 500 pounds for a so-called middleweight. That would be forgivable if it came with power to match, but it doesn't. The inline-4 engine puts out just under 80 horsepower, but it feels sleepy, flat, and late to wake up. Twist the throttle, and you wait and wait for the bike to catch up. Then there's the build quality. Panels that don't line up, switch gear that feels like it came from a toy bin, rust appearing on bolts after the first rainy day. It's all the stuff you hope not to notice until you can't ignore it anymore. And yes, the sound. It's a 4-cylinder, but it sounds more like a dull whine than a banshee scream. The exhaust note is forgettable, the ride is uninspired, and the overall feel, cheap. Parts support is another mess. Benelli is technically under Chinese ownership now, and that's made parts availability a nightmare in many regions. Good luck getting a clutch cable or fairing without a 3-month wait. The TNT 600 was supposed to be a smart alternative, but what you get is a bike that tries hard and falls short. And if you think a BMW will be better, that proves just because it wears the badge doesn't mean it's worth the ride. Number 13, BMW G310 GS. The BMW G310 GS was supposed to be your ticket into adventure. A light, affordable way to get that GSBADGE without dropping 20 grand. But what you actually get is a bike that feels like a marketing exercise, not a real adventure machine. Let's start with the engine, a single-cylinder, 310cc setup that buzzes like an angry lawnmower. It makes just 34 horsepower, and while that might sound fine for beginners, the vibrations and flat power band make it feel lazy and unrefined. At highway speeds, the G310 GS is screaming for mercy while you're getting passed by minivans. Despite the low displacement, this bike isn't exactly featherweight. It weighs in at over 380 pounds, and with a tall seat height, it can feel top-heavy and clumsy, especially off-road. That means the very riders it's aimed at, newer, shorter riders, often find it intimidating, not inviting. Then there's the build quality. Yes, it's got a BMW badge, but this bike is built in India, and early models suffered from poor finishing, loose hardware, and electrical issues. That had owners returning to the shop way too often. Even now, many riders report a bike that feels cheap, not premium. It's an adventure bike that's barely ready for paved roads, let alone anything gnarly. And once you realize that, you'll start wondering why you didn't just get a used Japanese dual sport that actually delivers. But don't worry, the disappointments aren't over yet. Now, let's look at a legendary motorcycle that was supposed to be revolutionary, and ended up being just plain wrong. Number 12, Harley-Davidson VRod. When Harley-Davidson dropped the VRod, it was supposed to be their future on two wheels. A radical departure from air-cooled cruisers, built with help from Porsche no less. Sleek, low, liquid-cooled, and packing a revolution engine that screamed instead of rumbled. On paper, it was badass. In reality, it became one of the most polarizing bikes Harley ever made. Let's talk about that engine. Yes, it made 115 horsepower, and yes, it revved high, but it didn't deliver that signature Harley low-end torque. You had to rev it to get it going, which made it feel more like a sport bike with cruiser geometry, and not in a good way. For many longtime Harley fans, it just didn't feel right. Then there's the riding position. Long and low looks cool until you're cruising for more than 20 minutes. Forward controls, a straight bar reach, and a seat that basically disappears under you. It's a recipe for stiff hips and numb hands. Comfort, not even close. And don't forget practicality. Tiny fuel tank, no wind protection, and limited luggage options made it a form over function nightmare. It was too heavy for performance guys, too weird for cruiser purists, and too impractical for tourers. Worst part, Harley abandoned it. The VRod's production stopped in 2017, and support has slowly faded. Try finding parts in a few years. Good luck. The VRod was Harley's moonshot that never landed. And speaking of machines that couldn't decide what they wanted to be, there's this sport bike that promised speed and delivered disappointment. Number 11, Hyosung GT 650R. At first glance, the Hyosung GT 650R looks like a serious player, with sharp fairings, dual front discs, a V-twin engine, and a stance that screams, "I'm here to win." For riders on a budget, it seems like a cheap alternative to a Japanese sport bike, but give it a few weeks in your garage, and you'll start realizing exactly why it costs less, because it's built for less. Let's start with the engine. It's a 650cc V-twin, similar in layout to Suzuki's SVSX-150, but the similarities end there. The power delivery is rough, the throttle feels delayed, and the vibrations will shake your mirrors blind by 50 miles per hour. It technically makes over 70 horsepower, but the lack of refinement makes every ride feel like you're forcing it. Then there's the build quality. The plastics are thin, the paint fades, the switchgear feels like it's one ride away from breaking off. Reports of electrical failures, sticky throttles, and clutch cable snaps are all too common. This isn't just budget manufacturing. This is cutting every corner they could find. Handling? On paper, it's sporty. On the road, it's heavy, inconsistent, and not confidence-inspiring. You feel every bump, every wobble, every hesitation. And don't expect much aftermarket support or experienced mechanics. Most shops would rather not touch it. The GT 650R is what happens when a brand tries to look fast, without putting in the engineering to be reliable. It's the kind of bike that might win you a few likes on Instagram, but will cost you your patience on the street. And if you thought Hyosung missed the mark, what would you think about another bike with a tiny engine and a gearing nightmare? Number 10. Yamaha BR250X. The Yamaha BR250X was marketed as the ultimate supermoto for the street. Lightweight, sharp handling, and built to last. It took the off-road DNA of the WR250R and slapped on street tires, tighter suspension, and a touch of attitude. But behind the hype, this bike is all noise and no grunt. Let's talk about that tiny engine. You're working with just 27 horsepower from a 250cc single, and that power, you have to rev the life out of it just to keep up with city traffic. Twist the throttle and wait, because acceleration is more of a suggestion than a promise. On the highway, you'll be screaming in 6th gear just to hold 70 miles per hour, and that's without a headwind. Then there's the gearing nightmare. 1st gear is too tall for slow maneuvering. 6th is too short for cruising. You're always shifting, always revving, and never really moving. The buzz through the bars and pegs gets old fast, but here's the kicker: the price. Yamaha discontinued this model after just a few years, and now used ones go for $5,000 to $6,000. That's insane. For a 15-year-old 250, for the same money, you could get a modern 400 that eats this bike alive. Yes, it's fun in the twisties. Yes, it looks cool. But unless you live in a skate park and weigh 100 pounds, the WR250X is all hype and no muscle. And speaking of ridiculous designs, a bike added a whole extra wheel and somehow still couldn't get it right. Number 9, CanAm Spider 3. The CanAm Spider F3 was supposed to be the future of open road freedom, a 3-wheeled power cruiser that blended the stability of a car with the thrill of a motorcycle. But what riders actually actually got was a machine that's too heavy to be fun, too strange to be practical, and too expensive for what it delivers. Let's start with the weight. This beast tips the scales at over 900 pounds. And no, that's not a typo. That makes it heavier than most full-dress touring bikes. And unlike a motorcycle, you can't lean it into curves. Instead, you wrestle with awkward handlebar inputs. While your body gets tossed around like it's in a go-kart with a suspension problem, then there's the ride quality. The front wheels follow every groove in the pavement, creating a constant tug-of-war feeling at the bars. Potholes, you feel every one of them, ×2. And while it may look stable, the Spider's handling feels more like a snowmobile on asphalt than a bike designed for carving corners. The engine, it's got power, sure, but it's buried under so much weight that acceleration feels like pushing a fridge uphill. And with a price tag that can hit $20,000, you'd expect something more than a glorified trike that struggles to deliver actual fun. The Spider F3 is a machine that tries to be everything and ends up being neither bike nor car, just a bulky, uncomfortable, overpriced oddity. A three-wheel design is the biggest gamble on this list, but there's a certain lightweight that left riders questioning their life choices. If you're still here with us, kindly support us by liking this and subscribing to our channel. Number 8, KTM RC390. The KTM RC390 looks like a rocket. It sounds like a rocket, but ride it long enough and you'll realize it's more firework than missile. All flash, not much follow-through. It weighs just under 400 pounds, and it's got a 373cc single-cylinder engine that absolutely screams. And that's the problem. You have to wring its neck just to keep up in traffic. Twist the throttle and it gives you no low-end torque, just a delayed growl and a handful of buzzy vibrations. The suspension, it's stiff enough to jar your teeth on rough roads. Every bump feels like a punch. This bike is made for track days, not city potholes. And while it's got that sharp, aggressive fairing and race-like posture, it's also got an ergonomic nightmare of a seat. Long rides, forget it. Your back, wrists, and knees will be begging for mercy before you hit mile 20. The build quality doesn't help either. Owners have reported electrical gremlins, sticky switches, and more recalls than you'd expect from a brand that claims performance is its legacy. It feels like KTM spent all its energy on looks and forgot this thing had to actually function on the road. Sure, it's affordable, but you're buying into a headache. And while some riders swear it's the perfect entry into sport bikes, most just end up dreaming of a smoother, more refined ride. And speaking of dreams crushed by reality, there is a bike that comes from a brand that built its name on reliability. But this particular machine turned out to be a ticking time bomb. Number 7, Honda CBR 600RR. This bike was supposed to be the crown jewel of midweight sport bikes. The Honda CBR 600RR, a name that once meant perfection in corners, bulletproof reliability, and class-leading finesse. And yet, for all its glory, this generation ended up being one of the most forgettable and, dare we say it, misleading motorcycles Honda ever built. Let's get this straight. It looks phenomenal. That sharp bodywork, that aggressive stance, that red line that screams past 15,000 RPM. But beneath that racetrack swagger is a bike that feels empty on the streets. Why? Because it's tuned for the circuit, not the real world. Below 10,000 RPM, it feels like a snail dragging bricks. You'll constantly be shifting, revving, clutching, and sweating just to get it to move. It's also unforgiving for newer riders. The riding position, pure torture after 20 minutes. The seat feels like a plank of wood, and the throttle response, twitchy. Combine that with a stiff suspension and a dry curb weight over 400 pounds, and you've got a bike that punishes mistakes hard. Worst part, this model didn't evolve. From 2007 to 2012, changes were minimal. No electronic aids, no ABS, nothing to justify its price tag, as competitors started offering way more tech, more comfort, and more practicality. In the end, the CBR 600RR from this era is a reminder that even Honda can rest on its laurels. And when they do, riders pay the price. But what if a bike didn't just disappoint? What if it downright betrayed the people who believed in it? It wore an iconic badge and still managed to break hearts worldwide. Number 6, Kawasaki Ninja ZX25R. On paper, the Kawasaki Ninja ZX25R looks like a dream. A screaming 4-cylinder engine packed into a tiny 250cc frame sounds like the second coming of the 90s sport bike era. But once that green mist clears, what you're left with is a glorious sounding gimmick that falls short where it really matters. Yes, it revs past 17,000 RPM. Yes, it sounds like a baby Formula One car, but here's the problem. That sound costs you a lot. This bike is ridiculously expensive for what it offers. In some markets, it's priced higher than 600cc bikes. That has way more real-world performance and comfort. You're paying for a novelty bike that sings but doesn't pull. At lower revs, it's dead. You have to work for the power, twist the throttle and wait while the needle climbs. Downshift again and again. It's exhausting. City riding becomes a chore, and overtakes on the highway? Forget it, unless you're in the perfect gear at the perfect moment. It's also tiny, cramped for taller riders. The riding position is aggressive, the seat is narrow, and the suspension is tuned to remind you that you're riding something track-biased, even though you're probably not on a racetrack. And the saddest part? It could have been legendary, but instead of building a well-rounded machine, Kawasaki built a rolling tribute band, loud, flashy, and unforgettable for the wrong reasons. But not all bikes get away with their flaws. Some try to hide them under a badge soaked in history, and one Italian machine did just that until riders finally saw through the facade. Number 5. Moto Marini XCape 650. The name alone, XCape, promises adventure, mystery, freedom. You hear it and think of dusty roads, mountain passes, and that one trip you've always dreamed of taking. But the Moto Marini XCape 650, it's more like a brochure than a journey. Shiny, hopeful, but empty once you turn the key. Let's start with what they got right. It looks good. Tall stance, rugged ADV vibes, big TFT screen, and a fair price tag. It gives the impression of being ready for anything. It'll turn heads in the parking lot, and when you fire it up, that 649cc parallel twin hums with the kind of smoothness that whispers, "Trust me." But that's where the illusion ends. At its core, this bike is a Chinese-made engine wrapped in Italian branding. It's the same basic motor you'll find in cheaper bikes, like the CF Moto 650 MT, just tuned a bit differently. And while it's not bad, it feels flat, predictable. You twist the throttle and get something in return, just not excitement. The suspension? Soft, good for bumpy streets, not great when you push it off-road. The brakes? Spongy. ABS feels intrusive. You won't want to find yourself relying on them in a dicey moment. It weighs over 450 pounds, and when loaded with gear, it starts to feel like a bulldog in hiking boots. Stubborn, clumsy, and definitely not built for trails. Sure, it can tour, but you'll notice the vibrations at higher speeds, the budget components on long rides, and a general lack of polish in the little things. That TFT screen, bright but slow. The buttons, mushy. The windscreen, adjustable but wobbly. And it sells itself as an adventure bike, but doesn't really want to leave the pavement. It wants to look like it can. But for every adventure pretender like this, there's another machine out there, one with real pedigree, real charm, and a reputation that both haunts and inspires. And it's a British icon, brought back from the dead, and not everyone's thrilled about how it returned. Number 4, BSA Gold Star 650. When BSA announced they were coming back, enthusiasts around the world held their breath. The Gold Star 650, name alone, stirs memories of classic British thumpers, tearing down country lanes, roaring like a beast, and dripping with character. But what we got is a bike trying very hard to be vintage and missing the soul. On the surface, it looks stunning. Long chrome exhaust, teardrop tank, spoked wheels. It screams retro cool. You could fool someone into thinking it rolled straight out of the 60s. The single-cylinder 642cc engine even sounds like the old bikes. Deep, growly, and full of promise. It's got around 44 horsepower, and at a glance, it seems ready to punch above its weight. But beneath that polished nostalgia is a different story. The Gold Star is built in India, not the UK. That's not a bad thing on its own. Several great bikes come from there. But this one feels like a first attempt. The engine, it vibrates a lot once you get past 65 miles per hour. The brakes, adequate, but nothing to write home about. The overall finish looks good until you stare too long. Plasticky switchgear, inconsistent welds, and a few rattles where there shouldn't be any. And while it weighs a manageable 430 pounds, it rides heavier than it should. Low seat height helps shorter riders, but the front end feels vague, especially on twisty roads. This bike isn't built for corner carving, it's built for posing. Want a tour? Better pack light. The suspension bottoms out if you load it up, and the seat, comfy for about 30 minutes. After that, your spine will beg for mercy. Now, credit where it's due, it's affordable, clocking in under $8,000 new, and it turns heads like few few bikes in its class. For someone who just wants a looker for local weekend rides, it might do the trick. But if you want a bike that performs as well as it postures, you might feel let down. Still, not every bike tries to live in the past. The next one on our list, it doesn't need to. It's not modern, not smart, and quite overlooked for the right reasons. Number 3, CF Moto 650 Adventura. Here's a name most American riders skip without a second thought, CFMOTO. But what if I told you this Chinese-built adventure bike, the 650 Adventura, might actually give some big brands a run for their money? Yeah, I know. You're thinking, no way, but hear me out. Powered by a 649cc parallel twin, that's a direct cousin of the old Kawasaki ER6N engine. This machine pushes out around 60 horsepower, not blistering, not smooth, not reliable. Let's talk comfort. If we're being honest, this thing feels built for long rides. The seat is wide and plush. The windshield is tall and adjustable. The riding position, upright, relaxed, and easy on your back. With a seat height of around 32 inches, most riders can flat-foot it, and at 470 pounds, it's not featherlight, but it's manageable, especially once you're rolling. But here's the trap. Price, brand new. You can snag one for under $7,000. That's right, less than half what you'd pay for a BMW GS or a fancy KTM. And it comes loaded, a BS TFT display, USB charging, dual disc brakes, even integrated crash bars and side cases if you grab the touring trim. For a budget bike, it sure doesn't feel budget, but now your eyes will see hell. The switches feel cheap, the suspension is soft, and long-term reliability is nothing to write home about. Think you've seen it all? You haven't seen anything yet. The next 3 will surely blow your mind away. You think I've mentioned some bad bikes? Hold on to your horses, you'll see. Number 2, Royal Enfield Interceptor 650. The Royal Enfield Interceptor 650 wants to be a classic, and on the surface, it almost nails it. You get that handsome, vintage silhouette, twin shocks, chrome, a tank that screams 60s cool, and a price that makes you blink twice. This thing is cheap, so why doesn't it feel like a winner? Let's start with the engine. A 648cc parallel twin that's smooth, air oil cooled, and not trying to win races. It's got character, sure, but that character runs out fast. After 65 miles per hour, the vibrations kick in, hit 75, and your mirrors go blind. The bike feels like it's begging you to slow down. Handling, mild. The chassis is sturdy, but the tires feel like they were made from recycled rubber bands. They're fine on smooth roads, but wet corners become mini nightmares. The brakes are another story. They stop, eventually. If you're used to sharp response, get ready for a rude awakening. The single disc up front feels underpowered for a bike this size. Comfort is surprisingly solid. That seat is a cushy slab of nostalgia. But for tall riders, the peg position feels cramped after an hour or two. Yes, it looks beautiful. Yes, it's affordable. But if you're planning long highway rides or expect Japanese reliability, this ain't it. Still, some riders love it. And for them, it's not about the flaws. It's about the feel, the sound, the story. And if that's what you're chasing, you might be curious what happens when a true classic goes too far in the opposite direction. That's our number 1. Number 1, Cagiva Raptor 1000. This is not a dream bike. This is a fever dream. Is what happens when a motorcycle company takes one of the most unruly engines ever made and builds a frame around it that looks like it was sketched on a napkin at 2 a.m. by someone dared to out-weird Ducati. And somehow they pulled it off, sort of. Let's start with the motor. This thing is powered by the infamous Suzuki TL1000 SV twin, a snarling, torque-heavy power plant that was so aggressive. It gained a reputation for being unrideable at high speeds without serious rider skill. It's unapologetic, loud, and will try to rip your arms off if you're not paying attention. You twist the throttle, and it punches you in the chest with V-twin fury. Cagiva dropped that madness into a custom trellis frame and slapped on some of the most controversial design choices known to mankind. Dual bug-eyed headlights, a minimalist tank that looks almost unfinished, a tail section that could double as a sci-fi movie prop, and yet it kind of works in a who let this thing out of the lab kind of way. But is it a good bike? Number, it is not. The chassis is stiff, but not always stable. The handling is quick, but twitchy at the limit. There's feedback, just not the kind that fills you with confidence. You always feel like the Raptor is one bad idea away from throwing you into a hedge. And the ergonomics? Tall, strange, and not meant for comfort. Your knees will complain, your back will yell, and your soul will cry. This is not a machine for any rider. It's not refined, it's not polished, and it was never meant to be. It's a mess of subpar performance and confusion. It was too weird, too niche, and sold in too few numbers to ever catch on. There's a video coming up on your screen right now. You ready? Click on it, and let's go. Which of these bikes are you going to avoid? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channels.